The street was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights, the occasional hum of a distant car breaking the silence. James sat on his porch, sipping his late-night coffee, watching the world settle into sleep. But something felt off. 3 nights ago, a car had appeared just across the road, nestled in the shadow of an old oak tree. It wasn't an unusual sight at first, just another vehicle in a neighborhood where cars came and went. But this one never left. And inside, shrouded in darkness, sat a lone figure. At first, James ignored it, assuming it belonged to a guest at one of the neighbors' houses. But when morning came and the car remained untouched, unease began to creep in. It was the 3rd night now, and the man inside had barely moved, except for the occasional shift of his silhouette and the dim glow of a cigarette illuminating his face for brief seconds. James exhaled, trying to shake off the paranoia. Maybe it was just some lost soul, someone dealing with their own demons. Yet, the constant presence of those watching eyes gnawed at him. He could feel them scanning, analyzing, waiting. But for what? Something about this wasn't normal. And deep down, James knew that whatever it was, he was about to find out. James had always prided himself on his ability to read people, a skill honed through years of hardship, through moments where trust had been a currency too expensive to afford. His instincts had saved him before, and now they screamed louder than ever. This was not a coincidence. The first night, he had told himself he was imagining things. The second night, he had convinced himself he was overthinking. But by the third, there were no more excuses. He stood from his porch, setting down his cup with deliberate slowness. He wasn't afraid. No, fear was something he had learned to conquer long ago. But he was aware that something about this moment held weight, a significance he couldn't yet decipher. As he crossed the street, his heart beat steady but alert. He could see the faint outline of the man through the windshield. His face was barely visible, masked by shadows and the dim interior light. But his posture was relaxed, too relaxed for someone just passing through. James knocked on the driver's window, a firm but non-aggressive gesture. The man inside didn't react. His head remained tilted forward slightly, his gaze locked onto something unseen. James knocked again, harder this time. The man finally stirred, his movements slow and deliberate. He turned his head, and for the first time, their eyes met. Something about the man's gaze unsettled James. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper, an understanding, a quiet acknowledgement that sent chills down his spine. James cleared his throat, masking his unease. "Hey, buddy, you lost or something?" The man didn't speak at first. He merely studied James, as if weighing his response. Then, after a long silence, his lips parted. "I'm exactly where I need to be." James frowned. "And where's that?" The man smiled faintly. "Right here." A gust of wind swept through the street, rustling the leaves in the trees, whispering secrets that neither of them understood. James felt his muscles tense. There was something eerily calm about the stranger, a quiet confidence that suggested he knew more than he let on. James wasn't easily intimidated, but he knew when to step back and reassess. "All right," he said, taking a step away. "Just making sure everything's all right." The man nodded once, but his expression never changed. James turned, heading back toward his house, the weight of that encounter pressing against him like a storm waiting to break. He barely slept that night. The image of the man burned into his mind. What did he mean by that? Why was he here? And why did it feel like this was only the beginning? By morning, James had made up his mind. He wouldn't live in fear. He wouldn't let paranoia dictate his actions. If this man wanted something, James would find out what. He stepped onto his porch, the morning sun casting long shadows across the pavement. The car was still there. But this time, the man was gone. James exhaled, relieved and suspicious all at once. Maybe he had left. Maybe it was over. Then, as he turned to go back inside, his eyes caught something taped to his front door. A note, scrawled in jagged handwriting, were 5 simple words. "Don't look for me yet." A shiver ran down James' spine. Yet, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. James stood frozen, the note in his hand feeling heavier than paper should. The words echoed in his mind, twisting into questions he couldn't yet answer. Who was this man? Why had he been watching him? And why the warning? Determined, he scanned the street. The car was still there, untouched, abandoned like a ghost had left it behind. James had spent too much of his life running from the unknown. He wouldn't do it again. He approached the vehicle, cautious but unwavering. The driver's door was unlocked. A sense of hesitation flickered in his chest, but he ignored it, pulling the door open. Inside, the scent of stale cigarettes and something metallic lingered. A single envelope sat on the passenger seat, his name scrawled across it in the same jagged handwriting. He picked it up, his pulse hammering. With a deep breath, he tore it open and pulled out a small note card. "You're not who you think you are." James' stomach twisted. His mind raced through every possibility, every secret of his past, every buried memory. This wasn't just a warning. It was a challenge, and he wasn't about to back down. James' grip on the note tightened as memories flooded back, fragments of a past he had tried to bury. Something about those words felt eerily familiar, like a whisper from a life he had long abandoned. Determined, he searched the car. Under the seat, he found a black notebook. Its pages were filled with dates, locations, and cryptic messages, each one seemingly tracking him. Then, at the very last page, a single address stood out: his childhood home. Heart pounding, James drove. As he reached the rundown house, he was met with an unsettling familiarity. Inside, dust-coated furniture and faded photographs of his younger self lined the walls. Then, in a forgotten drawer, he found it, a newspaper clipping with his own picture. The headline read, "Boy disappears after family tragedy. Case remains unsolved." James staggered back. The man watching him wasn't a stranger. He was a missing piece of James' past. And now, it was time to uncover the truth.